Hey folks, Rex Bear here. Tonight's guest is a regular Elite Project, Marshall Masters.
Hey.
Hey Marshall, great to have you on the show. I want to give a quick introduction for people that haven't had an opportunity to hear about you before. Freelancer, writer, producer of YOWUSA.com. And since the late 90s, Marshall has been researching the Earth-related effects from Nibiru, the orbital path of a binary star system that has approximately a 3,600-year cycle. Now, Mr. Masters is the go-to source when it comes to Planet X, sustainable survival communities, crop circles, impact events, and future technologies. Like so many others, Marshall sees a bleak future ahead, and with that said, Mr. Masters also sees a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Now tonight, we are going to discuss the latest information on Nibiru, Planet X, infamous winged destroyer, and the possibilities Earth is getting very close to a binary star system orbit that has been talked about for thousands of years. If you'd like to know more about Mr. Masters, check out his work at www.YOWUSA.com and have access to thousands of articles and the latest information in regards to Nibiru and survival communities. Marshall, hey, it's great to have you on the show again with this Elite Project. How's it going?
It's going. Good to be back, Rex.
It's a pleasure to have you. I know we've talked a few times in the past, and you always bring just so much good information to the table. One of the things that I was talking to you about before we started the show is I used to be really skeptical about Nibiru and Planet X. Oftentimes I felt as if it was a wag the dog scenario to get, certain powers that be, help orchestrate some event to get people to give their attention towards something that might not matter when they're doing something else. But it seems like it's a whole system now, right?
It's a mini constellation, yes. And at the core of the mini constellation is a brown dwarf we call Nemesis. And it's a binary twin to our own star. Most of the solar systems, 90% of the solar systems in our galaxy have multiple suns. And we are like the 90%. We have multiple suns. We have two suns. And that is what's happening. This second sun is in orbit around Sol. It's a smaller sun. It's what's called a brown dwarf. And brown dwarfs are actually relatively new in terms of astronomy because they've really come into existence in terms of what astronomers are talking about. And yet we find they're very common throughout the galaxy, a quite common, ubiquitous, if you will, type of star. And they're very dirty because they're small stars and they have enough critical mass to ignite, but unlike our own sun, they can't maintain a nuclear furnace, so to speak, continue burning bright. And they become very dark. They give off a lot of heat, they give off a lot of radiation, and they can sustain life. This system that is a mini constellation, and in my book, Being in It for the Species, I talk about the three major planets in the system, which are, from the inside out, Helion, which is a large gas giant, and about the size probably of Uranus. And then there's Arbota, it's a smaller planet, rocky planet. And then there's the outermost major planet, which is Nibiru. And that is the one that Zecharia Sitchin revealed to the world through his translations of the ancient Sumerian texts. And that's the one that's really a hard one for a lot of folks because what Sitchin found is that, well, we're the bastard children of the Anunnaki. In particular, in his book, The Lost Book of Enki, which is an autobiography of Lord Enki of the Anunnaki. And these were the folks that came from Nibiru to mine gold. They need gold to repair their atmosphere because each time they fly through the core of our system, it just wreaks havoc with their upper atmosphere, and they have to patch it up. And so they come here and they get the gold to do that because we have a lot of gold on this planet relative to other planets. And, well, we were created as a species to mine gold for the Anunnaki. And there was nothing very mystical or magical about this. A couple of advanced prototypes where, they were out there by the side of a river, and Lord Enki of the Anunnaki saw them, and he went, "Oh, cool! I got to get me some of that." And next thing you know, there's modern man, which explains why before the ancient Sumerian culture, we were just primitive hunter gatherers. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, we have architecture, language, science, all these things just there. And so that's the reason why Sitchin really gets a lot of flack from a lot of people because that really runs contrary to the story of Genesis.
Well,
And the thing here is the big the big question is when this system comes through, are the Anunnaki going to return?
that's a good question. We had Gerald R. Clark on here the other day, and
Hmm?
this guy is just, I'm talking an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to the Anunnaki and the specific names and the bloodlines and the genealogy. I mean, the guy is on par with anybody. But one of the things I've often wondered is this planet that's coming back, if it is going to get close to our Earth, do you feel as if the Anunnaki are still there and they're going to maybe possibly come back to Earth and kind of do this Independence Day type scenario, or what do you think is going to happen?
They're going to come. I write about this extensively in my book, Being in It for the Species. It's not going to be pretty. They're going to come for women, for their breeding programs, and they're going to come for gold. And it's going to be like the Yakuza showing up to collect the percentage. So it's not going to be a very charming encounter for us. There are a lot of people that hold out the hope that they're going to come and bring a lot of enlightenment and all of this. And actually, they're building, I think, temples of Baal or something like that.
Yeah.
And this is a preparatory for their return. But yeah, no, it's not going to be pretty. And we're going to be glad to see them go.
You think it's going to be like a war? You think we're going to attack them, or do you feel that their technology is so advanced that that's maybe why all these TV shows and programming's coming out on cable, satellite, promoting this agenda of these ETs occupying our planet, and we have no way to get rid of them, essentially?
When they come, their technology is going to be so advanced that we would be incredibly foolish to try and do anything to fight them. So they're going to come, take what they want, and then they're going to leave before the really bad times happen. They will leave prior to this is going to be a pole shift flyby. The last time that we had a pole shift flyby was Noah's flood. And people kind of like, well, I mean, what do you mean that was a pole shift? Well, think about Noah's flood, and that's the deluge story. Deluge stories, there's like 200 versions of the deluge across the world in literature, folklore, and so forth, ancient wisdom texts. And stop and think about it. The ark was built where?
I don't know.
Okay, it was on the side of a mountain.
Okay.
Now, if Noah was smart, working with an investment banker, Noah would have built the ark in a harbor. And that way, if his disaster didn't happen, he could turn it into a casino and a hotel and clean up. All right. But no, he builds it on the side of a mountain. Why? Well, we're told in the story of the deluge, it was 40 days and 40 nights. And science has long maintained, well, it's impossible. There's not enough surface water on the planet to do what the Bible says. Well, let me put a different spin on that. You have a pole shift event, and there's in the Bible prophecy the days of darkness. Now, the days of darkness are also described by remote viewing instructor Ed Dames in the Kill Shot. He's talked about this. I have his video from 2004. And he describes very well what's going to happen. And that is Nibiru is going to pass between Earth and Venus. We are going to have a complete eclipse of the sun. And because of the way we're moving through the skies, it's going to be a slow transit, which means we're going to have days of darkness. It'll be pitch black. It'll be horrifically frightening for everyone on the face of the planet. And It's going to pass between us. And when this happens, we're going to have a pole shift. And so remember I said we had Halion, our Boda, and Nibiru, and then there's Nemesis. Nemesis is going to be passing through our side of the solar system between Mars and Jupiter. And so you're going to have the tidal gravitational forces of these major bodies passing through our side of the solar system. We're going to be on the same side of the sun as this system, which is exactly what happened with Noah's flood. The Exodus, which was the last flyby, actually, we were on the opposite side of the sun when the Nemesis system, the Planet X system, was transiting southward back into its furthest distance from the sun in a 3,600-year orbit. And that's lunar years, by the way. And this time, it's going to be a Noah's flood scenario because what we know is Noah built the ark on the side of a mountain. Well, there's a reason for that. If you have a pole shift event, you have all these multiple objects getting what's called a lithosphere lock on our planet. Actually, a term was coined by an English coal miner who sent me a bunch of research. And I've always felt it was most appropriate. So with the lithosphere lock, we're going to know when that happens because in my book, Being in It for the Species, I describe something called Lurch Day. Lurch Day is literally when we just, get grappled onto. Think of the old movies from pirate days, and the pirates would come up close to a ship that they wanted to plunder, and what would they do? Throw the hooks over the side and then reel it in and then go in and have their mayhem. All right, well, same kind of situation here, except we're headed in opposite directions as it's going south and downward, and we're going around in our orbit. And so this lithosphere lock, we're going to have that lurch day. And when that happens, our planet is slowly going to stop spinning, and then it's going to reverse direction. And we're going to have a pole shift event. And during this time, every major body of water on the planet is going to come out of its basin. It's going to slosh. Now, when that happens, for the people that are living along the coastline, this is when you see these mile-high tsunamis coming at us. A good example was the movie Deep Impact that came out in 1998, and that massive mile-high wall of water. Or the movie 2012, where you see this massive mile-high wall of water carrying an entire aircraft carrier and other ships and plowing right into Washington, D.C. And so we see plenty of examples of what these pole shift tsunamis are going to look like in the movies. That is part of preparatory foreshadowing. And so now you have these massive waves coming in. Now, whatever's in the harbor, it gets ground to pieces like hydraulic sandpaper, just ripped to shreds. So if the ark were built in the harbor, it would just, the water would come over it, tumble it end over end, tear it apart into slivers, and adios, Noah. But Noah built it on the side of a mountain. Now, the water is coming in across the landmass. Now it's crossing dry land, which means the friction is pulling the energy out of that wave at a very prodigious rate. And as the wave goes inland, it will finally ebb. And the ark was situated where when the water ebbed, instead of going over the ark and tumbling it and tearing apart, the water ebbed in such a way with enough force that it would come under the keel of the ark, lifting it up off the yokes and then pulling it back out to sea. So it makes you wonder, if Noah had built the ark 100 feet too high or 100 feet too low, either way would have been catastrophic. All right. And what does that lead you to say? Well, you look at in the biblical account, but you look in the other deluge accounts, and there are mysterious visitors who are involved with these stories who say, here's where you need to build it. And I believe that is extraterrestrial intervention that's being distributed or described in these ancient deluge accounts, because this explains why Noah built the ark on the side of a mountain. There was going to be a pole shift tsunami because the oceans are coming out of their basins, plowing across land, ebbing just under the keel of the ark with enough force to lift it off its yokes and to gently pull it back out to sea. That's what we're facing with this coming flyby scenario. And right now, if you look to see, if you go to our site, yowusa.com, or you just type in marshallmasters.com, all right, that's with two L's, and you look at Planet X Signs Update number 7. My wife, Jennifer, is doing the signs articles now, and wow, she just knocks them out of the ballpark. It's hard on her, though, because the news is getting really, really dark. It's getting really bad. You know, when we first started doing the signs articles, it would take us 2-3 months to really pull together a sufficient amount of story material to publish what we felt would be a significant article. Now, in a matter of a few weeks, there's so much coming in that we're overwhelmed. We're no longer waiting to gather the information for a few months to publish. It's just every few weeks, we're so inundated, all we can really do is filter through it and literally skim off the top to take the most important things that are happening. And in this one, I mean, we have 38 volcanoes erupting right now. The Ring of Fire is just popping with major earthquakes. And there are seismologists who are saying, you know, wow, the only place on the Ring of Fire that hasn't had a major quake very recently is the west coast of the United States, which means we're due. And there's talk of a mega quake. All right. I was watching a video Tom Lupshaw was talking about. FEMA is preparing for some very serious earthquake events, massive earthquake swarms, not swarms of 2s and 3, but earthquakes in the 6 and 7 range, leading up to a major quake of a 9.0 or more. So events are moving along very quickly. One of the things Jennifer pointed out in the Signs article is that for years I've been hearing the Inuit up in the Arctic area talking about the fact that the sun was no longer setting in the same place and that the stars were not where they normally were. In fact, some of the Inuit have died because they're trying to navigate during the dark winter time and the stars are not where they're supposed to be and they get lost and they die. Well, now we have, mainstream science has finally said, we not only have a magnetic shift of our North Pole, but we have a physical shift as well. And an interesting thing is an Arctic white owl showing up in England. You know, that's a little strange.
Yeah, it is.
So these events are starting to happen at a more rapid pace. In my book, we talked about the winter of ash. And one of the things we came to realize when we looked back at our research notes when we were doing that was the guide that we were using was a scientist in his previous incarnation, and he was from Chile. So it would have been winter of ash for the southern hemisphere, not the northern hemisphere. And what we're seeing now is consistent with winter of ash for southern hemisphere timing, not northern hemisphere timing. And yes, there are, with these major quakes, with volcanic eruptions going off, airports are being closed. And this trend is, if this trend is going to continue, then what we're going to see next, and this will be a harbinger of things to come, is when you start seeing the region of the western side of the Ring of Fire, all right, from, a huge area. And this is, think about all the just-in-time manufacturing that goes on. So you have Hong Kong and Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Malaysia, Philippines. Well, you start shutting down all of these airports. The Boeing 747 cargo freighters cannot take off because jet engines and volcanic ash do not mix. They don't do well. And so what we'll see is a shutdown of just-in-time manufacturing around the world. That's going to create havoc, economic havoc. We're going to have political havoc because the United States is a dominant force in that region right now. But how do we project our strategic power? It's with naval aviation and land-based bombers. Again, jets and ash don't mix. And so we're going to be grounded. On the other hand, the Russians and the Chinese have a different strategic posture. They rely on submarines and missile cruisers, which can operate very handily in these conditions. And so there will be a shift in power that goes on. Manufacturing around the world is going to be impacted. And it's, we had a prelude to this on 3/11 when we had that huge earthquake in Japan that set off Fukushima. And as you recall, there were a lot of companies that were very hard pressed because the Japanese had to close down their airports. And just-in-time manufacturing worldwide, plants were closing down. It was a really economic crisis. Well, we're going to have that economic crisis. Another thing that will happen is in these areas where if we have enough ash to close airports, you're going to have enough ash to blanket the countryside, which means agriculture is it's going to be devastated. Now, right now, we go to the grocery store and we have all kinds of fruits and vegetables, and a lot of things are imported from places like Vietnam and South America, and they come from everywhere. Well, if this Western region with this vast populace is no longer able to grow food to sustain itself, all these ships that are bringing all these tasty goodies to us at Walmart, they're going to go to the highest bidder, which means they're going to head west across the Pacific. And what we're going to see are going to be shortages in the stores. We're going to have skimpy shelves and higher prices. Americans are going to feel the pinch. And also, there's a lot of, in America, we grow a tremendous amount of wheat, corn, and soy and so forth. Well, this is controlled by these multinational corporations, these agribusiness corporations. So if they can take the grain that they're using right now to make bread for Americans and they can double their profit margin by shipping it over to the other side of the Pacific, that's exactly what they'll do. And so the price of everything in the store is going to go up. And so these are the kinds of things that we're seeing coming to pass. And when they do, when this winter of ash happens, then your listeners can understand that we are firmly, unequivocally, we're in deep kimchi. It started.
I mean, there's so much going on right now, Marshall. If you look at just all of the seismic activity with the earthquakes, and anybody that just goes outside now, think back 20 years ago, folks. No, let's just think back 10 years ago. And what was it like when you walked outside? Was it anywhere near as intense? Was the sun anywhere near as white as it is now? It was more yellow. You could walk outside, and if you glanced at the sun for half a second, it didn't burn through your retinas. Now, even with polarized sunglasses on, you look up at the sky, and it seems like it's just insane. And not only that, I mean, I've got physical evidence that the radiation levels have doubled in San Antonio over the past 3 years. And I think a lot of that might be not just because the chemtrails that's depleting the actual atmosphere, but maybe we're getting closer to a second, like the fact that we are getting closer possibly to this binary system. Maybe that additional radiation is leaking through.
Well, what's really happening, and this is a process that began in 1940. 1940 was a very pivotal year because in that year, an astronomer, Carlos Muñoz Ferrada, was the first professional astronomer to announce the existence of a planet he calls Hercules, that was the name the Atlanteans gave to Nibiru, and the existence of a dark star. Brown dwarfs were originally called dark stars or black stars, and it was later that the title brown dwarf was coined. But back then they didn't have that. He predicted the existence of this type of star and this planet, Hercules, or what we would call Planet X, Nibiru, Destroyer, Frightener. It has many different names because there's a lot of folklore on it. And so, it's what's happening is that from 1940 on, as this mini constellation system, Nemesis and the planet and moons, were approaching a point of perihelion to the sun. Now, perihelion is the closest distance Nemesis comes to the sun. Aphelion is its furthest distance. And perigee is its closest distance to Earth. And so we're going to have the pole shift event because perigee, when it reaches perigee, will be on the same side of the sun. During Exodus, we were on the opposite side of the sun. So there was only the plagues. This time we'll have the plagues plus Noah's flood. It's really going to be what we're looking at is a combination of both the biblical story of Noah and the flood and Exodus. And so it's going to be a very difficult, very hard flyby. So in 1940, when we started looking at solar information, that's when we started seeing an increase in solar radiance. And you were noting that by the color of the sun. And that's the reason why, for example, we have geoengineering. They're spraying up in the clouds. All right. And we see the jets overhead all the time. I do a podcast once in a blue moon, and I just put up a podcast, and my wife and I both came down with chemtrail flu. And not only are they using this to mask the sun, so they're trying to diminish the amount of sunlight that we're seeing, but they're also using it to spray us with all kinds of harmful agents.
Oh, they love us though, Marshall. They never want to hurt us.
Yeah. Hey, can I interest you in a bridge?
Oh, it's crazy. I mean, the amount of chemicals that they're spraying in the atmosphere is absolutely ridiculous. And then you look at some of the stuff, they've actually done tests on some of these particles that have fallen to the ground from these chemtrails. They found genetically modified Ebola, all sorts of other nasties. It's insane.
It is, well, it's just downright evil. What I'm saying to people is they're setting us up literally that, to be honest, we're all eventually going to become, this is Holocaust. Okay, this is final solution stuff. And we're all going to become Jews in the showers, as in Auschwitz.
What if we don't accept it? I mean, what if we say, look, we're not going to allow you to manipulate us and believe this stuff? Do you feel that there's still a spiritual battle that we can win, even though physically they have the tech, the advancements, and all this other nasty stuff to try and poison us with? Spiritually, we're still with Source, right?
We're with Source, but are they going to prevail in their plans? It is a fait accompli. And what are their plans? All right. If you look at what's happening with media coverage, and this is now media, years ago in the 80s is when I worked with CNN, and that was when there was actually competition.
Right.
That's when CNN was a lean, mean news machine, and it was a real honor to be involved. Now I agree with Larry King. They ought to change their name to the Cartoon News Network.
Larry King said that?
Yeah. And he's absolutely spot on because they don't do, when I was there was gumsole work. We were doing a lot of research. We were out there digging for the news. They don't do that. They just read what they're told to read now. They don't do original research.
Scripting for the National Security Agency and the CIA.
That's it. CNN has basically become a modern day Pravda from the Soviet era. And that's what they are. What you see with the mainstream media is that there is a tremendous amount of filtering, suppression, trivialization, and so forth of the kinds of things that we've been talking about tonight. And, let's be very clear. If you read our article, all right, on our site, yowsusa.com or marshallmasters.com, and update number 7 for signs, we cite credible sources, all right? And we evaluate what these sources are doing, and we're actually showing the kind of engineered suppression that they're involved with as well. So this is not, something where it's Mama Yablonsky's Vegetarian Crystal Ball Emporium. All right. Uh, these are major sites. These are major newsworthy sites, Smithsonian and National Geographic and so forth. And we're tracking this stuff. I would say that print media has been doing an infinitely better job of reporting this stuff than the electronic media. Electronic media is now so tightly controlled by just a few corporate, there's just less, you could count the corporations that control all of this on one hand. And they're pumping out the message. Now, why are they doing all this control? Why are they throttling the message? Why are they making people think, well, yeah, things are happening, but they're not happening to us? What they know is, let's go back to Noah's story. We're going to have these mile-high tsunamis, right?
Okay.
The vast majority of humanity lives where? Along a coastline.
Right.
If you want to dramatically reduce the population, convince them to just stay where they're at, and they'll drown. That's all. They'll just drown. Population reduction. We didn't kill you. This big ugly rock that came flowing through, that's what killed you. Sorry. All right. And that is, that's how they're doing it. I lived in Santa Cruz County, California. And I will tell you that when I talk to people in what we call the flyover states, they're pretty savvy. They are savvy. But you talk to people living along a coastline, and it's all of this ridiculous, stupid bravado because neuro-linguistic programming, disinformation, all of that. They want to just keep these people right where they're at so they will shelter in place and die in place. That's the whole thing. Your listeners could go find on Wikipedia, all right, the Georgia Guidestones. Georgia Guidestones are 10 commandments for the 21st century, written in 8 languages. And the first one says, keep the population of humankind under 500 million. But it doesn't say how we get there. It just says, keep it there. Okay? Well, now you know how they get it there.
So you think that it's going to be this Nibiru flyby event, and then basically they can have this plausible deniability. Oh, well, we're sorry. You guys were the ones that wanted to move to San Francisco. You guys wanted to move to Seattle. It's not our fault that a mile-high tsunami made you and your family drown. I mean, it was just natural. Let me ask you this, Marshall. Do you feel that they have a contingency plan for all of the nuclear reactors? There's over 400 of them around the world. If this is going to be a global catastrophe, how are they going to keep those rods cool before they just go into meltdown like Fukushima?
We're going to have Fukushimas all over the place. When this is finished, the oceans will be dead.
You think we're going to be the next Mars?
No. I think that when we complete this flyby, it's going to be interesting. Let me go back. Remember I said this is a combination of the 2 stories, Noah's flood and Exodus. The last major event of the flyby will be a deluge. It will be a 40 days and 40 nights because the atmosphere is just going to be loaded with, oh my God, just a crazy soup of stuff. And so that is going to cause a massive monsoon, a global monsoon, if you will. And that is going to cleanse the earth. It is going to cleanse surface waters. There are going to be new seabeds rising up from the oceans and other seabeds that are collapsing, but the ones that are rising up are going to be inundated with salt. And so this heavy period of global monsoon, if you will wash the salts away. So the earth is going to heal itself. I call this the backside. And this is when we will see blue skies once again. And I believe that when the pole shift is finished, that the tilt, our polar tilt relative to the sun, the galactic plane, all right, or the solar plane, excuse me, and we're tilted towards that. I think our tilt is going to be less extreme, which will give us more mild seasons. So for those who survive this, they very well could find some areas on Earth that will be like a new Eden. But we're going to, nonetheless, we're going to see massive eradication of life in the oceans because all of these reactors that have been built along shorelines, when they say, well, fine, we can scram the reactor. Whoop-de-doo. You can scram the reactor. Geez, is that supposed to give us a sense of calm and peace? No, because even after you scram the reactor, you got to keep it cool for a couple of years. And if you don't have electricity or fresh water to run and the pumps and to fill the pumps and to fill the pools, you're going to have Fukushimas popping off all over the place. And they're going to make a hell of a mess of things. And I think that this is something that the elites actually have done by intention.
And with that said, I mean, also let's jump back to the Nibiru doom dates that have been brought up since 2003 for the modern times. I mean, it's been brought up many times before that, but it seems like since 2003, there's been this real push for Nibiru. And I almost feel like the government did this, or the powers that be, these specific people that are just so good at orchestrating the masses, lemmings. Let's get them to do this. Yeah, we can say this on TV and they'll follow it. I almost feel like they knew that if they came up with this cry wolf scenario for 10 years, people would get to the point to where, when it really does start to come around, they're so docile and conditioned to the fact that they've been warned about it so many times, they're not going to believe it.
Well, I got into reporting Nibiru and writing on Planet X. I started researching and studying it back in 2001. I published my very first article in January of 2002. And I had a lot of help from Dr. Brian Marsden of the Smithsonian Astrophysics Lab. We prepared that scenario for a PAX TV interview, and PAX TV, they soundbited me and made me sound like I was supporting the notion that dinosaurs and human beings lived together a few thousand years ago, which was really a humiliation for me that they would do something so ugly to me. And it also cost me some good friendships as well. And I published my article, Did Planet X Kill the Dinosaurs? Really just to get the work out there and to show that the PAX had lied through their teeth. And what they did was inherently dishonest. And I started reporting after that and going on. And next thing I knew, I started getting a lot of emails from people about Nancy Leader, the Zeta Talk website. Now, I will tell you that if you go to yowza.com, you go to my homepage, I tell this story in very clear detail, Planet X, the good, the bad, and the ugly. For many, many years, for well over a decade, I just didn't want to talk about anybody else. But I keep getting so many questions about people who are spreading disinformation. And Nancy Leader was doing that. And in my article, I just come right out and say she's a dishonest cultist. All right. And there are other people that I take exception with in the science arena as well. But back then, what happened was Nancy was forecasting a catastrophic flyby of Planet X in 2003, the summer of 2003. We didn't see anything in any sort of empirical data that would suggest that was actually going to happen. We couldn't see any substantiation for it. And so we published an article because so many people were contacting us, Zeta Fact versus Zeta Hysteria. And so Nancy was the one Nancy Leader is the one that created the 2003 panic. And that's exactly where that source goes to. I had Nancy on my own Cut to the Chase podcast, and Nancy's method is that she channels Zetas because of some sort of implant, as I understand. And she said it was the only time that the Zetas ever lied to her because they wanted to trick George Bush into invading Iraq. And, well, it's all pretty incredulous stuff. But it caused a hell of a panic, and you're right, it did. I mean, we used to get letters from people that broke our hearts to read. They were, you know, people were struggling to sound sober and rational, but they're asking us, do we sell our homes? Do we flee to the mountains? What do we do? And, you could just see the fear oozing between the lines. So the whole 2003 thing that was orchestrated, and it was really the guy that really did more to pump it up was a fellow by the name of Mark Hazelwood. And Mark Hazelwood actually uh, stole a great deal of the work that Nancy Leader had published. When he brought out his book Blindsided, Nancy Leader actually had her attorney write him a cease and desist order, which he ignored. And he sold a ton of books, created one hell of a panic. So, did the elites do it? No, they didn't do it, but they found some, they found some people that just did their dirty work for them. And after we told everyone this was going to be a non event, it was a non event. After that, interest in Planet X absolutely cratered. I remember, it was in August of that summer, we wrote an article, Is It Time to Revisit Planet X? And I think, including ourselves, 4 people read it. So that gives you an idea how much damage was done. Um,
That sucks,
but
man.
that really sucked. But, on the other hand, uh, for us, it was a little bit of a blessing because we knew this thing existed because we were following the science. And we just had a nice relative period of calm to follow the topic and to do our research without having to feel, the need to get out there and publish or perish, as they say. And then what turned things around and what really resurfaced the topic was the 2004 superquake and tsunami in Sumatra that killed 250,000 people. Then following on the heels of that, then of course, you had Katrina. So after Sumatra and after Katrina, interest in the topic was right back on top. It was very strong again. And in 2012, there was an awful lot of speculation about Nibiru being here in 2012. And I remember in August of 2012, I was being interviewed by National Geographic. And they asked me, is there a direct relationship between the Mayan calendar and Planet X? And I said, well, at this time, we don't see any direct linkage. So all we can say is that it is, it's coincidental. That's all we can really say. That's all we're seeing. Now, that was not what National Geographic wanted because the only empirical data on Planet X and the Mayan calendar prior to December 21, 2012 was the Arbitron ratings and how much money the cable companies were making a fortune on 2012 doomsday videos. Oh boy, they were making a doomsday.
Yes, they
Well,
were.
but we, you know, that was all. I mean, I just, I call it the way I see it, and we stuck with that. However, back in 2015, there was another Planet X researcher who was doing some stuff and writing to us, and he piqued our curiosity. And we revisited December 21, 2012. Excuse me. Now, the Mayans would not have been looking for something that says, okay, on today, the world ends. It's like, so why the hell do we need to know, right? What you really
Right.
want is a harbinger. You want something that says, okay, you got stuff coming at you. Like the story of Joseph with the 7 lean cows and the 7 fat cows. That's the kind of information you want to know. And that's what the Mayans were looking for. Well, on they were looking for a very specific celestial alignment. And so what we did was in 2015, we had the ability to go back and say, all right, up till December 21, 2012, the empirical data didn't show anything. Let's look at it again from December 21, 2012 forward. And when we did, our jaws dropped. There was a direct linkage between Planet X and the Mayan calendar. We were looking at earthquakes and meteors, particularly fireballs. But when we looked at earthquakes and meteors, remember Roadrunner Coyote cartoons and how, the coyote would get on an Acme rocket and the thing would go zoom straight
Yeah.
up
Oh,
and then it
yeah.
would go straight down into a, way, way, way down and then poof, that was the end of it. Well, when we looked at earthquakes and we looked at meteors, all of a sudden what we saw was right after December 21, 2012, Wile E. Coyote was on an Acme rocket, boom, straight up. The stats were just explosive. And so, yeah, what the Mayans were looking for was a celestial alignment. And when that celestial alignment happened, they knew that a flyby of Planet X was going to happen within the coming years, and that it truly was something that would reset the calendar. And that was, the whole name of the game. So there is that direct causality relationship, but you have to, you just can't go and start throwing stuff out there without at least trying to do your homework. And, unfortunately, that's something that we see quite often. Case in point is when Jennifer, my wife, was working on this new Signs article. We were, everybody was talking, oh, Yellowstone's, oh, the animals are fleeing and this and that, all of this Yellowstone stuff. Well, now that was actually planted disinformation. They were saying the animals were fleeing the park. No, they had images of the animals running into the park, not out of the park. And what they were doing was dredging up old news accounts. Like they say, old tricks are the best tricks. And so this is the kind of disinformation the elites do play, and they do quite a bit of it. All right. So here, they're just the point of it is that people get caught up in this idle speculation, and folks just believe what they want to believe. The last thing people want to do is homework. The last thing people want to do is actually vet a news account. And that's the truth of it. And the elites really take good advantage of this basic flaw in human nature. And this is, one of the ways in which they are spreading disinformation, keeping us distracted. Another thing is that you'll see them, going on and on about old conspiracy theories. And again, that's to keep people, running down rabbit holes. Remember, if you want people who are living near a coastline where they're going to drown like rats when things happen, you keep them preoccupied with nonsense. And that's what they do. And they do you got to give the devil their due. They do a brilliant job of it. And, they have one thing, they just have human nature working in their advantage. Okay. It's like you want to destroy a little town, you find a boulder on the top of a hill and you just kick out the little stone that's holding it up. And then the boulder is going to go, yippee, I'm free to follow my inclination, rolls downhill, hits the town, smashes it to smithereens. That's what they do. That's what they do. So, what I see is, yeah, it's a fait accompli. They are going to achieve their goals of killing not millions, but billions of people. And these people are going to participate in their own deaths. Now, For your listeners, here's where you have to understand that there's going to come a time I call the rage. And this is when all these people who have been so intelligently telling folks like you and myself, or warning them, it's all nonsense, nothing going to happen, oh, I don't want to hear about it. Okay? And they've been sitting there pontificating on our stupidity. They're going to wake up and realize they've been lied to. And they're going to be filled with rage. And then there's going to be all of this self-righteous indignation. I am a citizen. I'm a patriot. I pay taxes. I deserve the truth. Blah, 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 blah. And they're going to pick up their signs and they're going to run down and they're going to protest in front of the federal buildings. And then they're going to get 2 warnings to disband. They won't. And then that's when they're going to realize why our government has purchased 1.6 billion rounds of hollow point small arms ammunition. There are going to be bodies everywhere. It'll be like Kent State, but on an industrial scale. And people are going to go, well, maybe protesting is not necessarily going to work the best for us. But there will be that time of rage. And what your listeners need to understand is when people are saying, grab a sign, come down and charge the barricades with us and demand your rights and all that, what you need to be doing is running in the opposite direction, screaming, feet don't fail me now. You don't want to be around it. You don't want to be around it. Get the hell out of Dodge. If you haven't already done that long before, get the hell out of Dodge. You don't want to be around because it's a no-win, it's Kobayashi no-win scenario. And that's going to be the truth of it.
Well, we interviewed here on the Leak Project. I talked to a gentleman that is a part of the, he calls it Protester Spring or something like that, where him and about 2,000 people have pledged arrest. Actually, they're going to go to Washington, D.C. They're going to get arrested because they're not going to move, and they're going to make it difficult to do voting or something like that. It's called Democracy Spring. I'm sorry, and their agenda is basically changing the system. And I talked to one of the people that's really pushing this agenda. I interviewed him here on the show on the Leak Project, and I can appreciate people that want to make life better for everybody. I can appreciate people that want to give freedom and liberty to everybody. I mean, that's great. That's what life's all about. I don't think the government should tell us what we have freedoms of. We should have the opportunity to make our own decision. If we're not hurting somebody else, so what if we want to think for ourselves? I mean, that's what's the wonderful thing about being human. But I think that these people that are going to go out and put themselves on the line and get arrested, I mean, because ever since Occupy Wall Street that took place, there's now actually new laws in place that if you are blocking a federal worker from getting to work, they can literally hit you with a felony. And if you, I mean, so they got to be real careful. Who knows where they're going to take them? And maybe protesting isn't the best option. Maybe the best opportunity for surviving this and being prepared is to just have food, supplies, water, resources, be mentally prepared, spiritually prepared. And if it's going to be as bad as many people think it is, and if we're not going to make it through this event, well, make right with the people you are with now. Spend time with the people you care about and do what you can now. Do you think that we really have a chance to make it through this, Marshall?
Yes, and actually the advice that you just gave your listening audience is superb, Rex. I tip my hat to you.
Thank you.
That is exactly what you need to do. Look, what we're facing here is really the cycle of empire. All empires fail. They all fail. And they all fail for the same reason. Empires rise up quickly because everybody has a piece of the action. But at some point, you're going to have the ruling elites who are going to get greedy. They never can get enough. Never. And so they start consolidating power and wealth unto themselves. And what happens is it drains the body politic, and the nation becomes brittle. And so events that would have never caused the collapse of the empire when it was young and healthy and vibrant will do it now quite easily, and it could come from any number of directions. What we have is a situation where when we use the term our government ceased to exist decades ago. It's not our government. We are the owned chattels of fascist, corporatist sociopaths. All right? That's the truth of it. And they're running the show. People do sense it. You know, when Jennifer and we drove cross country last year, started in end of August in Minnesota and drove all the way west. We went through South Dakota,
Lucky
saw,
Duck. I love it out there. Did you go check out the Badlands?
we went down, we passed, but we didn't get a chance to really get into the Badlands, but we did see the presidents.
Ah, yeah, Black Hills. Love it out
Okay.
there.
And I think it's really pretty out there. It's the rest of South Dakota. Yeah, no. But that, I really enjoyed that. And so we did that. We went to Yellowstone. We were in Montana. We were in Wyoming, Idaho, Washington State, Oregon, and back to Nevada. And when we got to Nevada, Jennifer made an observation that just stunned me because it was absolutely spot on. She said, "You know that uh, we saw more American flags on the sides of chemical plants than we did on T-shirts and jackets." Stop and think about that. Here we're going, past national sightseeing places, okay? And, through mom and apple pie part of the country. And we're seeing more flags on the sides of chemical plants than we did see on jackets and T-shirts. So the point here is people really intuitively get it. They understand that, our government ceased to exist somewhere along the line while, we were distracted with smartphones and shopping at the mall and cheap Chinese good at Walmart. Somewhere in the process, we just didn't notice that it was stolen from us, and it was. And I mean, look at, for example, Ted Cruz is out crowing about his victory in Colorado, which was decided by the elites.
Oh, what? Mr. Monsanto himself.
Yes, Mr. Monsanto. And it's and Hillary? Oh, you want Hillary? Madam Monsanto? I mean, this is all incestuous. Our system has been stolen from us. And the ones that really, people don't really understand, the ones that set us up to fail is actually the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court is the one that created corporations as human beings with the rights of human beings. Before that, corporations were very strictly regulated and had to be formed for a very specific purpose. All right? They let the genie out of the bottle. They created corporations as human beings without the responsibility. When was the last time you saw a corporation go to jail for murder, and yet they kill us in the droves?
That's a good point. Good point.
Then you have these corporations that are now people who don't go to jail for the murders that they commit. It is the Supreme Court that says to the United States Patent Office, which since its inception has always said, you cannot patent life, period. We won't do it. The Supreme Court overruled centuries of policy and said, au contraire. We have created these people that can commit murder without going to prison, called corporations, and that's not enough. Now we're going to give them the power of gods. They can create life and they can own it. Then, in furtherance of that, early in the Obama administration, they said, oh, we need to protect these corporations that we've created as people who can murder without consequence and who now have the power of gods to create and own life. We need to give them added measure of protection. We need to allow them to go in and completely corrupt the political process so that they can prevent anything from touching what we have given them. And so if you want to know where is the root of evil in this country, United States Supreme Court. They're the enablers. They're the ones that created these monsters who now own us lock, stock, and barrel, who gave them the power to do what they do to us lock, stock, and barrel. That's the simple truth of it. And we couldn't do anything about it because, well, you know, Supreme Court justices, they don't have to stand election. All right.
Let me
That's
jump in real quick, if I can, Marshall, because
yeah.
you brought up South Dakota, and that reminds me of a news article that came out a couple months ago where they were actually selling an entire township in South Dakota for less than $300,000. And it was about 2 hours away from the Black Hills, and the Black Hills does a lot of brings in a lot of revenue with, tourism. You've got Deadwood,
Right.
Lead, you've got the Mount Rushmore, Keystone, etc.
Right.
But what do you think about this idea? I got to bring this out there to you because we've got a pretty big audience right now, and you reach out to tens of thousands of people on a daily basis with your website, yowusa.com. Many people that have been following your work now for years. And you also have this sense of creating, kind of like survival communities. We've had broadcasts on this show before where we've talked about creating communities that have sense and purpose that aligns up with each other. If you could purchase an entire township for less than $300,000, couldn't you then create a system of, you could set up your own sheriff, you could set up your own mayor, you could also start certain industries to where you could, sell products and inventory to certain areas. You could basically set up a situation to where this community could all thrive in this area. And since you've got your own sheriff and your own mayor, wouldn't you then be able to control kind of the political landscape as well?
Well, that would depend on who's writing the laws. I mean, look how the laws are continually being interpreted in favor of the corporate interests. So, gosh, who knows? And for me, it's just as aggravating as it is for, I'm sure, for you and for your listeners out there to see this and the impunity with which these people are doing this. But remember, this is the cycle of empire. This is the elites consolidating wealth and power unto themselves. And people are beginning to go, why? Rome was sacked because common Romans just simply said, you know what? Those thieving bastards in Rome, they've taken everything. So to hell with them. And, when the mongrel hordes were coming, they just stepped aside. Help yourself. Because
Right.
we don't see any, you're no worse than they are.
They had no sense of purpose, and they realized that the people that were controlling them were actually just as bad as the Mongolians coming in, I guess.
That's right. And Rome was built with fathers telling their sons, come home with your shield or on it. There was that time when, it was honorable to go out, go to strange countries and kill strange people. And, but then there was something to be derived from it. There was personal gain. Once there was no more personal gain, it was like, why? These people are taxing us. We don't get anything for it. They're thieving bastards. And so they stepped aside. And you have a collapse of empire. And this is what happens. It's just the nature of man. And we go through this process. So that's the reason why I tell people, look, don't get caught up in all of this. Don't try. It's too late to try and make a difference. The system is too corrupt. It's just going down the tubes. And it's going down the tubes of its own weight. And I want to share with you, this is an interesting story, because I really came to the realization that this was about a little over 10 years ago, the elite plan for population reduction. See, they want to reduce the population because then it's easier for them to control smaller numbers. That's all. That's what it's all about. Just reduce us in numbers, less demand on resources, fewer of what they call useless eaters. That's how they refer to us, as useless eaters.
You're right.
And this is, that's the reason why they want to get it down to $250 million or $500 million. I mean, let's face it. all you got to do is if you want us to proliferate, okay, you want us to create new population, give us a case of Ripple wine and a bottle of Viagra. We'll work wonders.
Hello.
Hello, yo, let's bungle in the jungle. And, that's it. We breed like rabbits, lemmings, and cockroaches. And they know that. So, and they don't see us any different than rabbits, lemmings, and cockroaches.
They
All
must
right.
not because they treat us like such.
They treat us like such, and that's the way it is. And when I came to the realization that a lot of people who, are slated for this kind of destruction, and there are a lot of good, kind people out there. We're told differently, but nah, there's a lot of folks out there that are struggling to do the right thing, to teach their children the right way, to have some sort of noble purpose to their lives. Because if it were otherwise, we'd have a Mad Max world already. And so I could see this terrible, terrible thing that was going to be done, this Holocaust that they're going to cause to happen. And this was about a time I started doing channeling research. I was very impressed with studying Nobel laureates and found out that many Nobel laureates would actually start becoming interested in the paranormal because science had only gotten them to a certain point and they were still hungering for knowledge and for insight. And so we began doing channeling research. We were very fortunate. We had superb channelers that worked with us, typically women in their 40s who were in very stable, loving relationships where their husbands were very supportive of their natural gifts. And they would volunteer to work in our studies without compensation. And they were really, really diligent, marvelous, marvelous women. We were using them really to look forward into the future. We had a process where I would do the interviewing through the channel with the entity, and then two other members were silent, they were muted, and they were instant messaging with me. One was giving me cross-examination questions, so we could keep going back like an attorney and analyze what they were saying. And the other one was giving me science questions. And so we had a very rigid process that we applied to it. And one of the things that we always did was at the end of every session, when we were dealing with, we had three kind of entities we were dealing with: unincarnated, incarnated, and extraterrestrial. And the unincarnated were just simply entities that had never incarnated in human form, incarnated that had been in human form before, and then, of course, extraterrestrial. And I was, struggling with this realization that we were being set up by the elites to fail, that they were going to see to it that we would die in vast, vast numbers. And this was a very difficult time for me, Rex, a very depressing time to come to realize this incredible inhumanity because on my mother's side of the family, all of my relatives in Europe, every man, woman, and child was killed by the Nazis in the death camps. And so it hit me at a very personal level because when you learn that your entire family tree went up a German smokestack, what's left is a black hole. You go on ancestry.com and what are they going to do? Find gold fillings, So this was a terribly, terribly, terribly depressing time in my life. It just really hurt me. And finally, one day, I asked this one psychic, really talented. Boy, she was good. She could pull in entities from all over the place. And I expressed to her what I've told you now, and she said, all right, well, let's see who comes through. So we started. And a guide came through by the name of Serapis Bey. Funny thing is, you can find him on Wikipedia, for God's sakes. Serapis Bey was an ancient priest in Egypt. And his thing as an entity was to actually answer this one burning question that I had about this. And, I explained it to him, and just as I've explained to you. And here's what Serapis Bey said to me, and it was a turning point in my life. It was really a turning point. Serapis Bey said, Marshall, the story of humanity is a large book of many, many, many chapters, most of which have yet to be written. This chapter is owned by the elites. It is their chapter. And there is absolutely nothing you can do to take it away from them. Nothing. So don't bother. Don't agonize. Don't try. It's theirs. However, all chapters, like all books, come to an end. And this chapter is but a few pages away from its end. And the elites know the next chapter is not theirs. It's yours. And everyone else. In other words, it is for your species. It is for your freedom. It is for your evolution. It is for your chance to have 1,000 golden years of peace that have been promised to us by all kinds of prophecy. However, what the elites are banking on is that they have one Hail Mary pass that they can do. If they can bluff us into relinquishing our birthright to the next chapter, if they can bluff us out of it, it's theirs for the taking. And so what it really comes down to is you just say no. No, we're not going to let you take it. We're not going to let you bluff us out of it. It's ours, and we lay claim to it. And it's not something where the universe is just going to go, okay, here you get, it's yours by default. Cheerio. No, that's not the way it works. It's ours, but we have to claim it. We have to stand for it. And so that's another reason why the elites want to diminish our numbers so dramatically. Because they are already setting aside vast stockpiles of all kinds of food, medicine, seeds, construction materials, you name it. They have vast underground bunkers. Why do you think the dollar is worthless fiat right now? They've sucked it dry so that they could build their underground bases and stockpile them with all kinds of things. Now, what are they going to use it for? It's an inducement. And what they're going to do is they're going to come up towards the end of the tribulation, the major events of the tribulation. And that's when they're going to say to the survivors, looky what we brung you. We got all these seeds, all this medicine, construction material, clothing, you name it. All of this we brought for you. All you need do is to agree to our terms, which is you will take this chip into your body. And that's when people are going to they're going to trade their freedom, they're going to trade their birthright for a bowl of lentils. And that is the Hail Mary pass. So we've heard all about getting chipped and what these RFID tags are all about. I'm going to tell you what they're all about. One day, I received a phone call from someone, a whistleblower in the government. And this person was terribly, terribly distraught because this person is a good Christian. And what this person learned is that what they're going to tell us is that the chip is just simply a transponder. It tells us where you are. It tells us so we can, work with you, help you. But no, this is a multi-frequency, multi-channel, multi-mode, simultaneous broadcast and receive chip. These are going to be extremely, extremely sophisticated. Now, they're going to be able to put up satellites, and those satellites are going to broadcast programming into the chips that are going to program your mind to make you docile and manageable. And for the people who are chipped, it's not going to be an ugly experience. It's going to be a very pleasant experience. They're going to literally be on electronic Prozac. And anyone that's on Prozac can tell you, you just don't have strong emotions about anything. Everything's just kind of la, 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 cool. And you're just going along, and life is good. And so, for the people that accept these chips, or what's called the mark of the beast, they're going to enjoy that process. But what this is really doing is not only can they use it to program people, control them, manipulate what they're thinking. Here's the point that this person, who is a good Christian, was terribly distraught and came to me with this knowledge after learning it in a briefing. They have identified the frequency with which we have our connection to Creator, the God frequency. They've isolated it. Now, the human body, we learned in the movie The Matrix, can produce enough electricity to light a 100-watt light bulb. 100 watts
You can do more than
is
that.
considerable. That's right. It could be more than that. And 100 watts is very, very considerable, my friend. And so what will happen is that this implant will create a damping field on that frequency. And so not only people are going to be on this electronic Prozac, but they're going to lose their connection to Creator. They're going to be taken away from God. They're not going to feel the presence of God in their lives. Now, not everybody will say that they feel the presence of God in their lives, but most will. And so that is exactly how the elites are going to lay claim to the next chapter of human history with a bluff to take something that's not theirs. And so those who stand up and say, no, I'm not going to do it, well, they will know what the circumstances are going to be, because with the elites, it's always the same old thing. First comes the carrot, then comes the stick. And so that is really what is coming down the road. And it is one of the reasons why there is a tremendous amount of effort on disinformation aimed at Christian audiences. First off, because simple demographics. If you get the Christians to, they can't come to a consensus, then they're going to do what? They're going to stay living on the coastlines, and they'll drown like rats.
Let me jump in real quick if I can, Marshall, because
Sure.
I was raised Christian. I was baptized a Lutheran. My parents are amazing people, and we were all, pretty liberal, yet we would go to church most Sundays, and I can really appreciate the Christian ideology. Most Christians have very kind hearts, and they want to do what's right for people. However,
Right.
I feel that this specific theology, this religion, has almost imprisoned people's minds, because there's so many out there that feel as if you use your brain, and if you think of different if you exercise your sixth sense opportunities, if you meditate, if you look at things outside of the norm, then you're satanic, you're the Antichrist, you're worshiping the devil. I almost feel like religion was created to kind of imprison the minds. And if Jesus is real, if Jesus is really our Savior, hey, fantastic. That's wonderful. I don't know. I really don't. And what is your thought on the religious landscape? Do you feel that many people have been imprisoned because of some of the pastors and priests out there that kind of pitch their own ideals on what spirituality should be?
Well, I do answer that in an article on my site I published last month called Planet X and Spiritual Christians. I am not myself a Christian, but I am very, very fond of spiritual Christians, very fond. And an easy way to spot who is a spiritual Christian, ask them, okay, how many study groups and churches have you been kicked out of because of the questions you ask? And if they start to chuckling, okay, that's a spiritual Christian. And, these are the ones that really do walk in Yeshua's footsteps. They get it. I mean, look at Yeshua. He was a rogue, okay? He wasn't a checklist Jew. He was a Jew, born a Jew, raised a Jew, died a Jew. He was not a checklist Jew. He was not a dogma Jew. He was not You know, he was none of these things. No doctrine, no dogma, no checklists. He didn't do that. All right. It was the reason why he was, someone that just simply drew a lot of heat. And so when I look at spiritual Christians, I go, these are the ones that really get it. And these are the ones that are going to make a difference. And so when I look at the elites and what they're planning, the ones that are going to stand up in the largest numbers and the ones who are going to suffer in the largest numbers will be the spiritual Christians. And really, in them, I see our hope for an enlightened future.
Why is that?
Because they get it. They get it. I think if you look at the teachings of Yeshua, you look at the Bible in the right way, it's a Planet X primer. All right? And the philosophy is just wonderful. You know, Yeshua in his time was a beloved rabbi. All right? He was a great teacher. And his philosophy that he brought was completely unlike anything in the world at that time. All right? It was powerful. And it carries on through the years. But there is a huge difference between institutions and your relationship to Creator. Your relationship to God is you and God. That's what I believe, period. You want to know God, you walk one-on-one with God. You want to know God, you struggle with God. You know, people who, you have to. There's like, God, why does it happen this way? Why does it happen that way? And you're trying to understand and you're working through it. And in the process of struggling with God, you come to know God. And people who follow checklists, what they know is a checklist. All right. And these are the people that are going to say, okay, this is the old checklist. Here's the new checklist. And they're just going to go from one checklist to another because what they understand is checklists. But it's the spiritual Christians, and their numbers are really increasing in vast quantity. All right. And I see, as a non-Christian, I see the hope for humanity in these people. I do truly believe that. I do truly believe that, Rex.
I mean, there's so many good people out there that follow, Jesus's teachings and the Bible, and I really appreciate that. The only thing that bothers me about the Bible is when you read the Old Testament, there's so many passages that talk about how God tells Adam to go kill every man, woman, and child, even the livestock. And I just have a tough time understanding that. Like, why would God, the divine providence, the creator of all knowing, make something that then he says, oh, I need you to go kill that because they're not good people? It just doesn't make sense to me. But hey, I don't understand everything. I don't know. Maybe I just am missing something here. But one of the things I really wanted to bring up
Rex, you're a spiritual Christian.
Am I?
Yes. You're struggling with God. Do you believe in God, Rex?
Oh, I certainly believe in the divine providence. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, you're a spiritual Christian.
I certainly have a belief, and I want to help the world and create balance. It just seems like we're in such dire straits right now. I mean, let's bring up the fact that there has been dozens of amateur astronomers that have been murdered or suicided or had some weird accident where they were killed. I know you write a lot about that on your website.
Oh, you mean people that stabbed themselves in the back 17 times?
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to kill yourself, why don't you stab yourself in the back 17 times? I mean, that totally makes sense, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah, it completely makes sense to somebody who's doing the stabbing. But that's the way the system works. But let me ask you point blank. All right? Would you go up in the hills, do a little garden, lay low, stay quiet, or would you stay in the city, take the chip, and let them turn you into a Prozac zombie?
I'm so far away from the Borg, you will not assimilate me. I'm going out into the woods.
You're my kind of guy. You're my kind of guy. I hope we're neighbors.
Me too.
So, like the Nazis used to say, nothing goes according to plan. All right. So, for all of their might and all of their power, they have hubris, and their tendency is to overreach. And that is where they always fail themselves. That is always where they fail themselves. Hitler declared war on America. America did not declare war on Nazi Germany. And that, when he's sitting there and he's fighting the Russians, which his generals thought was stupid in the first place because he had a deal with Stalin and Stalin was keeping his end of the deal. You know, he could have had his little fiefdom. But the point is, evil overreaches because it has a hunger. It has a hunger for more. It's insatiable. It can never get enough. All right. And so let them do what they do. You see, what I see coming out of all of this, all right, let's talk about what can you take to the bank, all right? Absolute bankable end conclusions to all of this stuff. One, we survive as a species. Take it to the bank. Number two, we rebuild. Take it to the bank. Number three, we go to the stars. Take it to the bank. And with number three, that is the $64,000 question all other intelligent life in our galaxy is asking. How do we go to the stars? Are we going to go as Anunnaki stormtroopers like you see in the movie Avatar? Are we going to have a Hunger Games world?
Which is what they want.
Or do we have a Star Trek future?
I want Star Trek.
I am for the Star Trek future, period. That's what I want to see for humanity. Star Trek future. And I believe that's our rightful destiny. I believe that that's what other races, the vast majority of races, there's a project called the Free Project. And they're going out and contacting all these people. They're getting a statistical database, and these are just rock solid scholars. And what they're finding is we have been sold a line of nonsense, basically bullshit, that the majority or all aliens are evil and bad. The fact is, it is exactly the opposite. The vast majority of other species out there are good. All right. And they want to see the good in us. They want to see us have that Star Trek future. And I think the thing that could be the game changer is something called the Great Winnowing. Now, this is what the ancient Egyptians tell us in the Colburn Bible. The Colburn Bible has very explicit accounts of Noah's flood in the story of Sesuda and Hanok, but it also has the Egyptian version of the Exodus. It's in two parts. The first part are the Egyptian texts, second part of the Celtic texts. The Colburn Bible is actually a compilation of Egyptian and Celtic texts. The Egyptian texts were written at the time the 5 books of Moses were being written, because the ancient Egyptians were trying to figure out, how did this scrappy little Jewish God kick our butts and our pantheon of Egyptian gods? And so they were pulling folklore from every end of the trading realm. You have phenomenal stories in the Colburn Bible. One of them, I believe, is from the Phoenicians, sons of fire. And I think, and this is really fascinating because the Phoenicians were amazing mariners. They were the first ones that could navigate by the stars. And so they didn't have to follow coastlines. And their trading routes went all the way from the Middle East, the shores of Lebanon, to South Africa, the tip of South Africa, and to Great Britain to the north. That was the extent of their sailing realm. And the Celtic texts were written approximately about the same time as parts of the New Testament. All right. And the interesting thing is there's a Celtic biographer who actually met Yeshua and his family. And it's documented. It's in the 12th and final book of the Colburn Bible, and has some really tremendous stories in there. But what the ancient Egyptians tell us is that when we have the days of darkness, when Nibiru is passing between us and the sun, and this is what Ed Dames, the remote viewer, calls calls the kill shot. We're going to have something called the Great Winnowing. Now, the way the Egyptians explain it is that when we're seeing this happening, it causes incredible fear. What they report is women become infertile, men become impotent. Now, stop to consider at this time, typical lifespan was about 35 years. So what you're really doing is scaring the sex out of teenagers. Can you just stop and think about it? Let's not, this is not a joke. What force of nature would it totally scare the sex out of a teenager? It would have to be pretty impressive.
Absolutely.
Now, what they said with the Great Winnowing is what will happen during the flyby is whatever is in your heart is going to be amplified hundredfold. There are only two absolute human emotions, love and fear. That's it. Everything else is one pastel shade of one or the other. Imagine you're standing in a paint shop. You see a white chip on one wall, a black chip on the opposite wall, and in between is every color you could imagine. And somewhere in the middle, there's going to be a chip that's just a tad more black and another chip that's a tad more white. All right? What the Egyptians are saying about the Great Winnowing is people who have fear in their hearts, that fear is going to be amplified 100-fold, and what will happen is they will literally die of fright. They will flicker out like light bulbs, just like that. Boom, they're gone. And the ones with love in their heart, that love is going to be amplified 100-fold. And I'm not talking about people who are sitting in the pews and singing the Psalms. I'm talking about grandmothers who pull together a group of orphans and say, kids, let's hold hands and we're going to sing nursery rhymes together and we're going to love each other all the way through this. Those are the ones that are going to survive. Those are the ones who have love in their heart in service to others, not in service to self, in service to others. Those are pure love. And you know what? It doesn't matter if they're checklist Christians or spiritual Christians. If they got love in their heart, the Great Winnowing says they will survive, but they will also be profoundly changed by that experience. All right? And we've read all kinds of stuff. I'm sure you've had a lot of guests on your shows talking about near-death experiences, shared death experiences,
yes,
major out-of-body experiences. Now, there's two classifications of experience, profound and otherwise, not profound. Now, I'll explain an example of one that is an experience, but not profound. Years ago, I was at a funeral, and I'm sitting there, and I could hear the deceased coming to me and saying, would you please go take my wife's hands? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, okay, who am I to refuse? So I walk up, I didn't know this woman, just kneeled down before her and just said, your husband asked me to just hold your hands. She held out her hands. I took her hands in mine. Next thing I knew, like 15 gigawatts came pouring right through me. And he just came right through my body like a conduit into his wife. And I mean, she jumped out of her chair. And, she just like, and she, her husband just wanted to be able to have that last connection with her. And then I just got up and walked away. Now that was an experience, but that was not a profound experience, because a profound experience is where you see yourself as an eternal being. And when that happens, if you talk to people who've had profound shared death experiences, profound near-death experiences, profound out-of-body experiences, they change. Their value system change. Greed no longer dominates their life. Materialism no longer dominates their life. They choose a path of service to others. They choose to be more compassionate, kind, and loving. They see the world in a different way, because once you've seen yourself as an eternal being, you understand the other side is home. This is Hotel California. And so what's going to happen is that when we go through this and the Great Winnowing happens, the people who are going to largely survive this are going, in the vast numbers, are going to be people who have love in their hearts and live in service to others. And I don't care what you believe. You believe in the great pumpkin, doesn't matter. You got love in your heart, you believe in service to others, boom, you're going to survive the great winnowing. And so we're going to have this huge population and people are going to make a difference. And now comes the concept of statistical push. All right. And this is going back to another channeling experience we had. And working again with one of these wonderful psychics that I was working with. And we were communicating with an extraterrestrial race on the other side of the galaxy. By the way, there are races that really resent us because we can do long-haul telepathy.
What does that mean?
We can go telepathically to the other side of the galaxy, whereas they can only go within a solar system. Their reach is much shorter than ours. We have a vast reach as a species. And so I was, we're having a conversation. And, we didn't do nonsense, Klaatu, Barada, Nikto. We didn't do that kind of stuff. We just have a conversation, Rex, just like you and I are having a conversation. That's exactly how I conducted these research studies. And at the end of this one conversation we had, the interesting thing was, you know what? We contacted probably a couple of dozen races all over the galaxy, and they all talked about the same thing. They all talked about the same thing. And if you read about the Hopi prophecy rock, that's exactly what they were talking about. We're at a fork in the road. And we continue on our current path, it's not going to work out well for us. But if we find the courage to take the enlightened path, to take the high road, we are going to have a fantastic future. And that's what they're saying is, look, we came to that fork in the road and we screwed the pooch and we paid for it. Don't make the mistake that we did. Take the high path. You got that opportunity, all right? And so this was the drumbeat message we were getting from these other races all over the galaxy we were contacting through our sensitives. And finally, after all of this, I had to ask this one ET. I said, let's be frank. You and I are separated by a galaxy. You're on one end, I'm on the other end. I don't think we're going to, I don't think you're going to be over to my house for tea and crumpets anytime soon. And I just want to know, what's in it for you? Why do you bother to talk to us? We'll never see each other. Why bother? What's in it for you? Here was the answer. It stunned me. The CT said, presently on your planet, you have over 7 billion souls incarnated. But Earth only has 2 billion native souls. That's all. It only has 2 billion native souls. The other 5 or so billion souls that are incarnated are the ancestors of races spread across the whole galaxy. We're interested in you because you've got our ancestors. They're incarnated in your form. That's why we're talking to you. That's why we're interested. Okay? So that you stop to think about it. By the end of World War II, we had 2 billion people. All of a sudden, the end of World War II, we go from 2 billion to we're, headed towards 8 right now. And if we only have 2 billion souls native to Earth, where are the rest of the souls coming from? It's a statistical push. There's a bigger picture at play here. It's hand of God. It is Creator's will. So I see this as a huge picture. I see this as something where the elites have got their little game down and they're going to do their chips and they're going to do all of this. But it's still a Hail Mary pass for them, despite all of their wealth, all of their controls, all of their technology, all of their manipulation. The odds are stacked in our favor that we will have that Star Trek future. I do truly believe that.
What do you think is going to happen at the end of this year, Marshall?
The end of this year, we're going to know what we know. There's going to come a point where we're looking up at the sky and we're going to see the Planet X system coming out from behind the sun. It's funny, we have on our website at yowza.com, marshallmasters.com. There's an article that is, I think, Ed Dames in Israel. Just look for Ed Dames in Israel. And because now Israeli mystics are finding references to Nibiru in Torah code and in the Zohar. And it specifically references 5776, which goes through September of this year. And it says, and what the mystics in Israel are saying is that this thing is going to, boom, appear to pop out of nowhere. All right. Now, when it does, I always hear from people, when am I going to see Planet X with my own two eyes? Okay. I mean, I hear it. Oh,
where's it at, man?
When am I going to see Planet X with my own two eyes? Here's my answer to everybody that asks that question. If that's the question you're asking, you're stupid and you deserve to die. Because there's a right question. That's the wrong question. The right question is, when will I believe what I am seeing with my own two eyes to be a clear and present danger? That's the right question. And the people who are saying, when am I going to see it with my own two eyes? They're stupid. They're lazy. They're not going to do their own homework. And they're going to let someone else tell them what they're seeing with their own eyes. And what they're going to be told is, don't worry, it's just going to be an interesting light show.
Swamp gas.
Exactly. Swamp gas. That's right. That's exactly what they're going to want to hear. And you know what they're going to do? Plant their butts right where they're at. And most of these people are going to be living along coastlines. All
We're
right?
safe. We're right next to the water.
That's right. You know, and it's like, why do we want to leave all the wonderful culture and seafood of living along the coast to go with those crazy, hicks living in the flyards, the flyover states? And they're going to have all kinds of ego and reasons for staying put. And then they're going to drown like lemmings. All right. So what will happen is initially people are going to be told, all right. I mean, did you see the movie Melancholia?
No.
Oh,
I heard about it from Gerald, though.
Oh, you got to see it. You absolutely have to see it because there's a scene in there with the wireframe. Okay? I'm not going to say anything more than that. Promise me you'll watch Melancholia. All right?
Absolutely.
Because that one scene with the wireframe is quintessentially what we call gullibility. I mean, how gullible are people going to be? I mean, imagine a housewife who is doing the laundry and she gets her husband's dress shirt from work and on the collar are 5 shades of lipstick.
Right.
She confronts him with it and he says, honey, don't worry. It was just one woman. She likes to wear a different color of lipstick every day, but I got rid of her because you're the only one in my life and I love you and we're good. And she goes, okie dokie.
Right.
All right.
Nanny, nanny, nanny.
I mean, people are going to be lied to. They're going to turn on CNN. They're going to stand out in the street. They're going to point up at the sky and they're going to go, hey, Phyllis, what do you think about that? I don't know, Fred. I never saw anything like that. Let's watch CNN. They'll tell us.
Hey, let's watch Dancing with the Stars. What do you think?
Yeah, that's right. And they're going to walk in. CNN going to have all the talking heads on. They're going to go, well, don't worry about it. It's just an interesting light show. And then what's going to happen is then we're going to have all kinds of stuff happening. Earthquakes, volcanoes, tornadoes. I mean, things are starting to get weird. See, nobody believes in earth changes until a sinkhole sucks their car into the ground along with their, with an in-law. And then if it's an in-law, they're still not going to believe it.
That's just a conspiracy. That's not real.
That's right. It's a conspiracy. All right. And what'll happen is then there's going to come a point where all of a sudden people are really going, what's wrong with this picture? They're going to finally ask that question, what's wrong with this picture? And that's when they're going to come back on CNN and say, well, we've had to adjust our calculations. Our new data sets have showing things that really have surprised us. And well, you can trust us when we say that we're going to have a few more bumps on the road, but it's going to be perfectly fine. And then people are going to go, okie dokie. And then after that comes the dying. Okay. After that comes the rage. All right. Now, what's going to happen is that when we're seeing everything and the first time they lie to us, there are going to be people that go, those bastards are lying to us. They're going to be the ones who are going to just pick up everybody else mocking them and laughing at them, okay? And they're going to go to places of safety. And so my efforts right now is focused on that window of opportunity to reach those people who, when they see this, they're not looking up and saying, I'm going to wait for CNN to tell me what I'm seeing. They're going to look up and go, I'm seeing a clear and present danger, and I'm going to do something about it.
Isn't it amazing how powerful the media has become? I mean, the programming that's out there now, I don't know if they've studied the MK Ultra programs that have taken place with the CIA for years or what, but it just seems like the media is so powerful now, and their abilities to program the masses has almost turned into an art or a science.
Oh, yes. It's a phenomenal science. And what they have learned is they're much more sophisticated now. Much more sophisticated. There's quite a bit that they adopted from the Joseph Goebbels playbook, but what they're doing now is infinitely more sophisticated. They create what I call expectation stampedes. You remember blood moon tetrad theory?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Well, what they do is they'll find a topic that is really resonating with a given demographic. In this case, it was a Christian audience, because now the funny thing was blood moon tetrad theory came out of nowhere. Nobody really saw that coming. I didn't see it coming. And when it first came out, we published an article on it. We're going, say what? And well, that was our best scientific estimate at the time. Robert Ryland wrote it for us. And but wow, blood moon tetrad theory really resonated. And then we saw the elites went, oh, hot diggity dog. You know, this is a gift. This is a gift. And they started pounding on it. Okay. All they got to do is find something that everybody's going, oh yeah, this is it, baby, this is it, you know, and everyone's all excited about it. And then what do? They
Promote
make
it.
sure. Yes, they promote it. And boy, they are absolutely the past masters of promotion. They're the ones that make sure that there are plenty of links on the internet, that the topic is really coming up at the top of the search engines, that it is just rocking and rolling and smoking. And everybody's sitting there and they're waiting for blood moon tetrad theory. And then, just for added measure, you know, they had the Pope come for a visit to give a talk to the UN and Obama, okay, at the same time this is supposed to happen. And then they had CERN. They're starting up CERN. They timed this perfectly. They had blood moon tetrad, Pope, and CERN all coming together at the same time, pumping up all the expectations on all this. Everybody's expecting something totally huge to happen. And it was like, fizzle, non-event. You know, that was it. And it was like, you know, Coyote lights the Acme rocket and it goes sputter, 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 and that's the end of it. And there's a huge crash of interest. And the result is that you have all these people who are, now they're really in deep kimchi, because they've been racing around telling family and friends, coworkers, associates, blood moon tetrad theory, and it's CERN, and the Pope is coming. And what did we learn about the Pope's visit? He should hire a new speechwriter. What did we learn about CERN? Well, whatever, you know. And blood moon tetrad theory, hey, you know, someone left us at the altar. It's like, that's it, quick, you know, call the caterer, tell him not to open the caviar. And, you know, that's what happened. And it was a perfect way. They were absolutely able to take and target the Christian audience, humiliate these people, who then in turn, what do? They walk away from justifiable concerns, because they've been led down the garden path, and now they've been humiliated in front of family and friends who are sitting there shaking their heads going, there you go again. All right.
Right.
And all of that was a brilliantly orchestrated elitist disinformation campaign. I sat there and watching it, you know, I mean, it's like, I mean, it's not like even having to read matrix code. It's so bloody obvious. Okay. It's like, wakey, wakey, look what they're doing, you know?
Right.
And, but people, you know, it's, they just get caught up with that stuff and there they go. You know, I mean, the moral of the story is, you know, the first rule of prophecy. The first rule of prophecy is always be mindful of it, but never, never live in expectation of it. That's the first rule of prophecy.
You think we're going into World War III here pretty soon? Maybe this year, next year?
God, I hope not. But
me too.
You know, it's when insanity starts, you never know where it's going to end. I mean, you have Putin, who is threatening Turkey with nuclear weapons. You have Pakistan threatening India with nuclear weapons. And mainly because the Indians they did a water deal with Pakistan, and they were like little lawyerly, aha, we found a clause. We can take all this water and just, you know, really, really whack your country really hard. And the Pakistanis arguably have a right to be angry, you know, because
Sure.
there was nothing honorable about what happened. And the Pakistanis are saying, we don't need any further provocation to use nuclear weapons. We already have that. And so, yeah, they're in the background. They're doing deals. They're working things out according to all this. Who knows? Who knows? But, you know, one of the things we're told is that when Planet X becomes visible, that's it. People are going to stop fighting. They're going to go home. They're going to look at that and they're going to go, it's time to be with my family. So, you know, I see more and more. I mean, I came into this as a born hard geek. All right. Logic is Tweeting Bird, live long and prosper. All right. And, you know, the more I see the hand of Creator at play. And things are going to, it's hard. We're not going to really know what's happening. I mean, it's because the way Creator works is everything rocks and rolls right up to the last minute. That's it. You know, it's like we're looking at the future and what's going to be. And in my mind, what I see is, you know, like the big, you know, when you're going to a bingo game,
Right.
you know, it's like 75 balls in bingo. Yeah. You know, something like that. I remember that old joke. What has 75 balls and drives old women crazy? You know, it's bingo. And, so you're sitting there and then boom, a bingo ball pops out and there you go. And it's like that. And so to me, that's the way the future is going to work. It's, you know, we're going to sit there and watch it. Everyone's going to pontificate. And then one day, boom, the bingo ball comes out. And then we're going to know what we know. But in the meantime, the smart thing to do is to be prepared for everything. You know, be a good Boy Scout, and you know, have your eyes wide open. Look and see what's happening in the world around you. Be aware. Be aware. I think that's the most important thing to do. And above all else, yeah, there's a dark cloud coming, Rex, but every dark cloud has a silver lining. And if you got half a brain, what you're doing is you're saying to yourself, okay, how do I latch onto that silver line?
Right. It's very frightening the times that we live in, folks. But, you know, with people like Marshall and others out there that bring this information to the table, it certainly gives us an opportunity to make sure that we have the resources needed to take it to the next level. I certainly appreciate you joining us tonight, Marshall. Check out Marshall's website, YOWUSA.com. He updates that website almost daily, and there's just a ton of information on there. I really appreciate you joining us tonight, Marshall. Thank you.
My pleasure, Rex. And remember, in the coming tribulation, it's not about holding on to things. It's about holding on to each other.
Very well said. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. LeakProject.com. Also subscribe, youtube.com/clandestine Time Lord. Be the change you want to see. This is Rex Bear. Have a fantastic evening. Good night. Hey folks, Rex Bear here. Tonight's guest is a regular to the Leap Project, Marshall Masters. Hey Marshall, great to have you on the show. I want to give a quick introduction for people that haven't had an opportunity to hear about you before. Freelancer, writer, producer of YOWUSA.com. And since the late 90s, Marshall has been researching the Earth-related effects from Nibiru, the orbital path of a binary star system that has approximately a 3,600-year cycle. Now, Mr. Masters is the go-to source when it comes to Planet X, sustainable survival communities, crop circles, impact events, and future technologies. Like so many others, Marshall sees a bleak future ahead, and with that said, Mr. Masters also sees a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Now tonight, we are going to discuss the latest information on Nibiru, Planet X, infamous winged destroyer, and the possibilities Earth is getting very close to a binary star system orbit that has been talked about for thousands of years. If you'd like to know more about Mr. Masters, check out his work at www.YOWUSA.com and have access to thousands of articles and the latest information in regards to Nibiru and survival communities. Marshall, hey, it's great to have you on the show again with the Leap Project. How's it going?
It's going. Good to be back, Rex.
It's a pleasure to have you. I know we've talked a few times in the past, and you always bring just so much good information to the table. One of the things that I was talking to you about before we started the show is I used to be really skeptical about Nibiru and Planet X. Oftentimes I felt as if it was a wag the dog scenario to get, certain powers that be, help orchestrate some event to get people to give their attention towards something that might not matter when they're doing something else. But it seems like it's a whole system now, right?
It's a mini constellation, yes. And at the core of the mini constellation is a brown dwarf we call Nemesis. And it's a binary twin to our own star. Most of the solar systems, 90% of the solar systems in our galaxy have multiple suns. And we are like the 90%. We have multiple suns. We have two suns. And that is what's happening. This second sun is in orbit around Sol. It's a smaller sun. It's what's called a brown dwarf. And brown dwarfs are actually relatively new in terms of astronomy because they've really come into existence in terms of what astronomers are talking about. And yet we find they're very common throughout the galaxy, a quite common, ubiquitous, if you will, type of star. And they're very dirty because they're small stars and they have enough critical mass to ignite, but unlike our own sun, they can't maintain a nuclear furnace, so to speak, continue burning bright. And they become very dark. They give off a lot of heat, they give off a lot of radiation, and they can sustain life. This system that is a mini constellation, and in my book, Being in It for the Species, I talk about the three major planets in the system, which are from the inside out, Helion, which is a large gas giant, and about the size probably of Uranus. And then there's Arbota, it's a smaller planet, rocky planet. And then there's the outermost major planet, which is Nibiru. And that is the one that Zecharia Sitchin revealed to the world through his translations of the ancient Sumerian texts. And that's the one that's really a hard one for a lot of folks because what Sitchin found is that, well, we're the bastard children of the Anunnaki. In particular, in his book, The Lost Book of Enki, which is an autobiography of Lord Enki of the Anunnaki. And these were the folks that came from Nibiru to mine gold. They need gold to repair their atmosphere because each time they fly through the core of our system, it just wreaks havoc with their upper atmosphere, and they have to patch it up. And so they come here and they get the gold to do that because we have a lot of gold on this planet relative to other planets. And, well, We were created as a species to mine gold for the Anunnaki. And there was nothing very mystical or magical about this. More a couple of advanced prototypes where, they were out there by the side of a river, and Lord Enki of the Anunnaki saw them, and he went, "Oh, cool! I got to get me some of that." And next thing you know, there is modern man, which explains why before the ancient Sumerian culture, we were just primitive hunter gatherers. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, we have architecture, language, science, all these things there. And so that's the reason why Sitchin really gets a lot of flack from a lot of people, because that really runs contrary to the story of Genesis.
Well,
And the thing here is the big the big question is, when this system comes through, are the Anunnaki going to return?
that's a good question. We had Gerald R. Clark on here the other day, and
Hmm?
this guy is just, I'm talking an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to the Anunnaki and the specific names and the bloodlines and the genealogy. I mean, the guy is on par with anybody. But one of the things I've often wondered is this planet that's coming back, if it is going to get close to our Earth, do you feel as if the Anunnaki are still there and they're going to maybe possibly come back to Earth and kind of do this Independence Day type scenario, or what do you think is going to happen?
They're going to come. I write about this extensively in my book, Being in It for the Species. It's not going to be pretty. They're going to come for women, for their breeding programs, and they're going to come for gold. And it's going to be like the Yakuza showing up to collect the percentage. So it's not going to be a very charming encounter for us. There are a lot of people that hold out the hope that they're going to come and bring a lot of enlightenment and all of this. And actually, they're building, I think, temples of Baal or something like that.
Yeah.
And this is a preparatory for their return. But no, it's not going to be pretty. And we're going to be glad to see them go.
You think it's going to be like a war? You think we're going to attack them, or do you feel that their technology is so advanced that that's maybe why all these TV shows and programming is coming out on cable, satellite, promoting this agenda of these ETs occupying our planet, and we have no way to get rid of them, essentially?
When they come, their technology is going to be so advanced that we would be incredibly foolish to try and do anything to fight them. So they're going to come, take what they want, and then they're going to leave before the really bad times happen. They will leave prior to, this is going to be a pole shift flyby. The last time that we had a pole shift flyby was Noah's flood. And people kind of like, I mean, what do you mean that was a pole shift? Well, think about Noah's flood, and that's the deluge story. Deluge stories, there's like 200 versions of the deluge across the world in literature, folklore, and so forth, ancient wisdom texts. And stop and think about it. The ark was built where?
I don't know.
Okay, it was on the side of a mountain.
Okay.
Now, if Noah was smart, working with an investment banker, Noah would have built the ark in a harbor. And that way, if his disaster didn't happen, he could turn it into a casino and a hotel and clean up. All right. But no, he builds it on the side of a mountain. Why? Well, we're told in the story of the deluge, it was 40 days and 40 nights. And science has long maintained, well, it's impossible. There's not enough surface water on the planet to do what the Bible says. Well, let me put a different spin on that. You have a pole shift event, and there's in the Bible prophecy of the days of darkness. Now, the days of darkness are also described by remote viewing instructor Ed Dames in the Kill Shot. He's talked about this. I have his video from 2004. And he describes very well what's going to happen, and that is Nibiru is going to pass between Earth and Venus. We are going to have a complete eclipse of the sun. And because of the way we're moving through the skies, it's going to be a slow transit, which means we're going to have days of darkness. It'll be pitch black. It'll be horrifically frightening for everyone on the face of the planet. And it's going to pass between us. And when this happens, we're going to have a pole shift. And so remember I said we had Halion, our Boda, and Nibiru, and then there's Nemesis. Nemesis is going to be passing through our side of the solar system between Mars and Jupiter. And so you're going to have the tidal gravitational forces of these major bodies passing through our side of the solar system. We're going to be on the same side of the sun as this system, which is exactly what happened with Noah's flood. The Exodus, which was the last flyby, actually, we were on the opposite side of the sun when the Nemesis system, the Planet X system, was transiting southward back into its furthest distance from the sun in a 3,600-year orbit. And that's lunar years, by the way. And this time, it's going to be a Noah's flood scenario because what we know is Noah built the ark on the side of a mountain. Well, there's a reason for that. If you have a pole shift event, you have all these multiple objects getting what's called a lithosphere lock on our planet. Actually, a term was coined by an English coal miner who sent me a bunch of research. And I've always felt it was most appropriate. So with the lithosphere lock, we're going to know when that happens because in my book, Being in It for the Species, I describe something called Lurch Day. Lurch Day is literally when we just, get grappled onto. Think of the old movies from pirate days, and the pirates would come up close to a ship that they wanted to plunder, and what would they do? Throw the hooks over the side and then reel it in and then go in and have their mayhem. All right, well, same kind of situation here, except we're headed in opposite directions as it's going south and downward, and we're going around in our orbit. And so this lithosphere lock, we're going to have that lurch day. And when that happens, our planet is slowly going to stop spinning, and then it's going to reverse direction. And we're going to have a pole shift event, and during this time, every major body of water on the planet is going to come out of its basin. It's going to slosh. Now, when that happens, for the people that are living along the coastline, this is when you see these mile-high tsunamis coming at us. A good example was the movie Deep Impact that came out in 1998, and that massive mile-high wall of water. Or the movie 2012, where you see this massive mile-high wall of water carrying an entire aircraft carrier and other ships and plowing right into Washington, D.C. And so we see plenty of examples of what these pole shift tsunamis are going to look like in the movies. That is part of preparatory foreshadowing. And so now you have these massive waves coming in. Now, whatever's in the harbor, it gets ground to pieces like hydraulic sandpaper, just ripped to shreds. So if the ark were built in the harbor, it would just, the water would come over it, tumble it end over end, tear it apart into slivers, and adios, Noah. But Noah built it on the side of a mountain. Now, the water is coming in across the landmass. Now it's crossing dry land, which means the friction is pulling the energy out of that wave at a very prodigious rate. And as the wave goes inland, it will finally ebb. And the ark was situated where when the water ebbed, instead of going over the ark and tumbling it and tearing apart, the water ebbed in such a way with enough force that it would come under the keel of the ark, lifting it up off the yokes and then pulling it back out to sea. So it makes you wonder, if Noah had built the ark 100 feet too high or 100 feet too low, either way would have been catastrophic. All right. And what does that lead you to say? Well, you look at in the biblical account, but you look in the other deluge accounts, and there are mysterious visitors who are involved with these stories who say, here's where you need to build it. And I believe that is extraterrestrial intervention that's being distributed or described in these ancient deluge accounts, because this explains why Noah built the ark on the side of a mountain. There was going to be a pole shift tsunami because the oceans are coming out of their basins, plowing across land, ebbing just under the keel of the ark with enough force to lift it off its yokes and to gently pull it back out to sea. That's what we're facing with this coming flyby scenario. And right now, if you look to see, if you go to our site, yowusa.com, or you just type in marshallmasters.com, all right, that's with 2 L's, and you look at Planet X signs update number 7. My wife, Jennifer, is doing the signs articles now, and wow, she just knocks them out of the ballpark. It's hard on her, though, because the news is getting really, really dark. It's getting really bad. You know, when we first started doing the signs articles, it would take us 2-3 months to really pull together a sufficient amount of story material to publish what we felt would be a significant article. Now, in a matter of a few weeks, there's so much coming in that we're overwhelmed. We're no longer waiting to gather the information for a few months to publish. It's just every few weeks, we're so inundated, all we can really do is filter through it and literally skim off the top to take the most important things that are happening. And in this one, I mean, we have 38 volcanoes erupting right now. The Ring of Fire is just popping with major earthquakes. And there are seismologists who are saying, you know, wow, the only place on the Ring of Fire that hasn't had a major quake very recently is the west coast of the United States, which means